Hey everyone, thanks for coming to our session. It should be exciting and very interactive, just specifically talking about sales in a fireside format. I am Peter Petrov, I'm the moderator, twice director at Boston-based startups, and here are my two panelists. Karen, would you mind introducing yourself first?
Yeah, sure. Can you guys hear me? All right, cool. Karen Kareev, probably the best way to think about me is a healthcare specialist, 25 years in healthcare, both in consulting and industry. About 2 years ago, I founded Sponsor Motion with a former colleague. We help healthcare-driven or adjacent companies go to market effectively and sell into healthcare or provide solutions for patients. We have a database of healthcare-specific events and then provide advisory services on top of that. Beyond that, I teach persuasive communications at Boston University, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
My name is Brian Dedenberg. I'm a co-founder and general partner of Venture Lane Studios, which is a traction accelerator. I'm also co-founder and partner of Sales Hunters, which is a recruiting business and outsourced sales service for early stage companies. We help companies figure out product market fit and get to market. I've been a sales leader for 20 years in the field. I ran sales teams in Asia. 3 of those companies I co-founded, and I helped an old business partner launch his company in the US when I first moved back. And I've been doing consulting and helping companies with their go-to-market strategies for the last 7 years in the US.
Thank you so much, both of you. And we'll start with some questions we formulated here, but we want this session to be very interactive, both virtually and on-site. So I will rotate the questions between Brian and Karen, starting with Brian. This one is great for you, Brian, given your experience founding and leading sales organizations. How do you typically handle the struggles with different stages of a company's existence?
So the first thing I think for any company with the sales, setting up their sales process, it's what stage the company's at, because the first stage for any product market fit is going to be very different than trying to scale the business. As a matter of fact, some of the things that you'll do in the early stage are the complete opposite things that you'll do in a later stage. So someone who's scaling a business is going to be really worried about optimization, where at a very early stage, that's maybe the last thing you're worried about.
That's very fair. And Karen, a question for you. How do you establish your ICP or beachhead market?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And I think it's the key to success for startups. The first step is really to hypothesize and test, experiment, know your audience. And what you need to do is get out there, figure out who you're selling to, what their problem is, what their motivations are for a solution, and start talking to them about a potential solution. Through that, you'll start to hear what sticks, right? Which elements of a solution are going to be most important, and which problems are actually solved by which solution. So many founders jump in super duper excited to talk about solutions and forget that there's another side to the problem, right? The more you know about your customer and the more you know about how they think about their business and where the actual pain point and urgency is, the more prepared you're going to be to sell to that particular customer. When you reach the point where you have customers jumping into your boat, just simply at the beginning, right? I have a solution that, we do X, Y, and Z. Tell me more. I want in. Can we test it? Then you've hit your ICP.
Thank you so much. And Brian, a question for you. This is a very interesting one, since I've seen anything from Series A to Series D as a talent leader or a recruiter. This is about really how do you actually delegate sales responsibilities as the team grows, and you can even take it further as the company evolves and the needs change.
We say delegate to as a sales leader. It's if you think about the early stage, the founders got to do all of the sales themselves, and then they start to hire people, and they create a playbook so that the salesperson that they're training, and even in that early day, the founder's going to co-sell a lot of that. And then as that team grows, it's going to, you're going to start to have hub and spoke with leaders and people below them. So then it's about coaching. The key in my mind is creating a playbook not that you follow it to a T, but that you can communicate and everybody's on the same page.
Thank you so much. And this is an interesting question for Karen now. When it comes to your thoughts, generative AI is actually very popular, and it probably will have an impact on us in the sales profession. I've already noticed some impact on recruiting and talent. But yeah, just wanted to get your thoughts. What are your thoughts on generative AI when it applies to the sales profession?
I think it's going to make salespeople even more valuable. If you know how to sell, if you know how to connect authentically with people, to have a real conversation, you're going to have the secret sauce, right? Generative AI is going to make it easier for you to connect, for you to find people, for you to test your language. But the real differentiator is going to be you, right? It's going to be the human connection, the authenticity that you deliver that information for. It's just going to make it a lot easier to do it.
I know a lot of salespeople that are worried that are going to be very happy to hear those words.
It's true.
I agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah, I think generative AI is amazing. It's going to change the world. I think it's going to make humans more human, right? And I think the second you put a human in front of any sort of solution in a world that's full of mediocrity, frankly, that is what generative AI is programmed to deliver on a surface level, you're going to be differentiated, right? It's up to the person who's delivering the message to deliver it in a meaningful and authentic way.
The only question I have for that is it's also going to remove a lot of the mediocrity from the market.
Yeah.
So no, there's a lot of salespeople who are mediocre are going to be in trouble.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Which is a good thing.
I mean, I don't know about you, but like I'm tired of getting the emails that are written from ChatGPT. They just get automatic. If I see another rocket ship in the subject, I just delete.
And Brian, is there anything you want to expand? You already mentioned an agreement, but do you see anything specific like to your companies or things that you're involved in generative AI?
So we're starting to see, there's a couple different ways of using it. One is for idea generation. One is for it should be the first draft of emails and then humanize it. But if you think about it, I have this thing I always like to say to people that it's everybody hates to look at a white piece of paper. So what generative AI does for you is it means that I never have to look at a white piece of paper again. Doesn't mean it gives you a good result. You shouldn't take that and use it. It just means I can have that first draft, whether it's 20% or 80%. I don't know and I don't care. It just means I get to start editing and changing rather than coming up with myself.
Just building on that and going back to the ICP question that we talked about, the missing piece, and I think the piece that makes a salesperson and frankly most founders valuable is the critical thinking that's behind it. How are you solving this problem? How are you positioning it in the market? How are you connecting with the customer? And generative AI does solve that white piece of paper problem, but it's the application that's going to be the make or break, right? It's going to be the differentiator for you. So how you take that piece of paper and bring it to the marketplace, right? It's how do you bring the emotion to it? How do you add the value that's going to actually drive sales?
I guess if you think about it, though, is it any different than what software did to the factory? The software took out a lot of the mundane, repetitive, I can't say baloney work that nobody wants to do. Just sit there and pull the same lever every day. The automation took care of that, and then the people in the factory now they make good money, and they've got to actually think on their feet. To some extent, this is going to do the same for salespeople. All those mundane tasks that salespeople have to do are going to be gone.
Yeah. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe after the Industrial Revolution, we actually created more jobs. So the hysteria around like all these jobs are going away, I feel is going to be replaced with there's all these new, meaningful, more interesting jobs out there for those folks who can think about how we can use AI differently.
Yeah, I hope so. I hope so. I don't know. I agree with you, but I think a lot of people are going to have to learn how to think.
I agree. Yeah. So maybe that's the message here, the answer to your question.
Maybe.
I love this. Such a lively discussion. I personally agree with everything that was said, and I think it's all about the application, specifically for recruiting. I like to use automations, not to remove the human element. And Brian, another question for you. around pivoting. So how do you redefine or pivot a sales process when a company scales?
Okay, so there's a couple. One is as you move through the stages, you're going to pivot the way you sell. So the founder-led sale to hiring your first salespeople, that's going to be a pivot. I don't know if that's what you mean, but that's going to definitely be a pivot. As then you start to scale and you start to operationalize it, and going from having a few people selling to having teams of people selling. So that's a pivot. And then the other is as you go into different markets, as you go launch new products, your sales models are going to change. So if I've got a product that is sold over the phone, but then I launch a more complex service or a larger ticket item to an enterprise, then I've got to add a whole nother process to my sales team, and that's a pivot. That's a challenge for an organization. If you're set up to do phone sales, inside sales, and then now you want to start selling enterprise sales, which is going out and meeting with people and selling large ticket items, your organization has to learn a new cadence and a new skill set.
Thank you so much. And I love this question, so I will pose it to both of you, starting with Karen. As a leader, how do you build and foster a positive and productive sales culture? I think this is such an important question, given that I'm in HR and I've been tasked with things like this before. So I wanted to pose it to both of you. Karen, would you mind starting?
I mean, I think number one is make it a great place to work, right? You have a great product, you have a great team, you have a great place to work, somewhere people want to go to. When you're thinking about a salesperson specifically and a sales team, what you're really aiming for is to drive and feed their hunger, right? A salesperson likes to make the sale. They like to get out there. They like to talk to people. They like to close those deals, right? So you have to incentivize them accordingly. The best sales teams I've ever seen are those that are incentivized to close without competition from each other, but also an element of collaboration. So sharing best practices, right? This is what worked for me. Make the introduction. Don't be afraid to work together, right? You're not going to lose money through collaboration. You're going to make even more money because you're sharing and actually pushing the ball forward for the company and the team as a whole, in addition to the individual. And then make it easy for them to win, right? Provide the tools and the practices and the marketing materials and the sales and the delivery on proof of concept that's going to make a customer want to talk to the salesperson. So net, it's really about taking that sales team, making the individual the star, and having the other sales individuals power the team and make the individual able to shine.
I agree with everything you've said. I have two things I would add from running sales teams. The first one is hire for values. Keep the core values, hire and fire based on values. If you do that, it's going to be much easier to not have use the right word, jerks on the sales team that can really ruin the culture. And then the other is constant coaching. I think the best sales leaders are really great coaches. They block and tackle. They work with their sales teams on a regular basis. They see when somebody's having a bad day, week, month, quarter, and they're giving them what they need. They onboard people well. They have a good onboarding process. As you get further along, it's really all about process, and I think it's all about process and coaching.
Yeah. The coaching thing is so invaluable. I heard an anecdote this week from someone who said, I gave a salesperson some coaching because they apparently had a very long sales conversation that was not productive. 3 months later, his wife came up to the sales coach and thanked him, because the patterns you see in real life are the same patterns you see in the business setting, right? So it's not just about coaching for sales. It's about coaching for humanity, coaching for rapport building, coaching for relationship development, coaching for just basic things and patterns that people may or may not be aware of, because it's the authenticity that actually drives the sale in the long run, right? People do business with people they trust, right? That's the core of sales. I'm going to give money to the people I trust, to the products that I want to use. The person who's delivering it is a vehicle, right? So if somebody has a pattern that turns customers off, that needs to get addressed first and foremost, right? Because then you're just pushing prospects away versus bringing them into your fold.
It's also, do you build a culture where if somebody's falling back a little bit, do you see that, does everybody beat up on them? Because it's like the old locker room style of sales, the Glengarry Glen Ross, anybody who's old enough to know that movie, of managing sales teams? Or do you help pick them up and let everybody see that that's our culture? We if somebody falls back, we at least give them a chance to come, if anybody on a sports team, somebody falls down a bit, but then ends up becoming one of the best players. Same thing with a good sales team.
Great answers. And a question for Brian, circling back to him. I really love this question because it addresses the changes between stages. How do you ensure that the productivity metrics of your sales teams are adjusted for different cycles of the company's life cycle effectively? I know I've personally seen Series A companies that felt like seed companies and others that felt like Series C. So I've seen the difference between stages, but yeah, I wanted to see how do you adjust those metrics, make them equitable and make sense for the given stage?
The metrics for the individuals, or the metrics?
Yep, sales productivity metrics.
So first of all, we're caught up in this Series A, Series C, and those are all centered around fundraising, which may or may not have anything to do with, which should, but may or may not have anything to do with the stage of a sales team. So first of all, I would look at the stage of a sales team irregardless of what stage they are in funding. The funding stage should be somewhat correlated, but you might have a deep tech company that's got a Series C and doesn't have many sales. So I'm going to compensate them more on activity than I am, and on some non-sales metrics. Are they able to learn? What are they? Sometimes what you learn in an early stage is more important than the actual numbers, and there's a lot of people who are going to shoot me for saying that. But once you get into that scaling phase, you've got a proven process, you've got a proven result that if you do these activities, you should get this results. Then it should be based on results and activities only. The beginning stages should be based on activities and learnings. So, did we learn about how a customer acts? Did we find a new target market? Did we learn who the buyer is? Did we learn how to sell to that buyer?
I think the piece I would add to that, which is tangential to the question, is to document it. Because these learnings, particularly in the early stage, fuel your future roadmap. And so often they're nice one-off conversations, but they're never captured anywhere. Then the team gets together later on and is like, what? They do the big, whiteboarding, brainstorming session. What should we do next? And then they go circular, right? Because, we should talk to customers and we should do this. When in reality, that early stage, and particularly some of these early conversations, really highlight where this roadmap can go. But to my knowledge, there's rudimentary systems for capturing and tracking those types of ideas later on.
The nice thing is today, there's a lot of technology that can record. So many more sales calls are now being held over Zoom or whatever you use, and those are recorded and transcribed. So whether it be a paid version like a Gong or a free tool like Fathom.video, those are two plugs. Which I have no investment in either of those, unfortunately. You can go back and find that documentation later. So that's changing.
I mean, even in the future, AI can go back and look for this information for you and pull it all together.
Not so far future. That can be done now.
Thank you so much. Such great answers. And similarly, I wanted to pose this question to both panelists, starting with Karen. In your opinion, what is the current biggest challenge facing startup sales leaders? I know there's been a lot of talk about the economic conditions. I'm not sure personally how much they impact startups. I know funding dries up, but you still have to operate. So just wanted to see, what are your thoughts?
I think if you're at the point where you're a startup sales leader, it's probably knowing how to sell. I don't think many folks who are startup sales leaders right out of the gate have a lot of sales experience. And if they do, they probably aren't having as many challenges as those who are like, I'm wearing 32 different hats, right? How do I manage this? How do I document it? How do I reach out? What are the tools I should be using? I think that learning curve for a newish sales leader is steep. especially since technology and tools are so rapidly changing. We all understand, right? You have a product, you need to sell it, you need customers, so you reach out and touch. But like, when you look at like what are the best practices in sales, there's, you know, the lead generation and the funnels and the, you know, HubSpots of the world, and it's completely overwhelming to many of the folks I speak with. Folks, I think, are really, really challenged to figure out where to start in a budget and time straps conditions in order to get to the MVP or to get to that next stage in product development that they need to get to.
Brian?
So I think one of the biggest challenges for everything you just said. I also think one of the biggest challenges for early stage sales leaders is if you have a lot of sales background for larger companies, you're not necessarily prepared to be a sales leader at an early stage company. The sales process for a startup is very different, and so. And then if you do have a lot of sales startup experience, you usually don't stay there that long if you do well, because that company grows. So there's not a lot of people who are really, really good at that early stage, which is in itself a conundrum, right? And I'd say that's the other one is understanding what type of person is the right sales leader for an early stage company, whether or not they have the experience.
Thank you so much. And the next question I wanted to do something similar, both panelists, but starting with Brian this time. And I think this is very relevant given that we are at Suffolk University and folks here may be earlier in their stages in their career. What are the two best sales practices that you've definitely impacted your individual careers the most, starting with Brian?
When I was purely a sales rep, I used to have a piece of paper on my desk, and I would live by it every day, the numbers, like how many phone calls I had to make that day, how many emails I had to send, how many meetings I needed to set that week, and how many deals I had to close that month. Those were the numbers in front of me all day, every day. And so it not that numbers are the only thing that matter, but you know, it's when I know I have to do that, I'd be in the office at 7:30 or at my desk at 7:30. And make sure that I hit those metrics every day. And if I wasn't hitting my metrics, then you raise your hand and ask for coaching and ask for help. So it's being both diligent on the numbers and then reaching out and asking for help.
And Karen?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. I think knowing where you want to go is key, right? I think some people are motivated by like the number of calls I need to make and the number of emails I need to send. For me, and my recent startup experience, it's been, I want to get, these 3 clients on board. I had my target list, and it was, you got to get creative, and you got to get creative fast. Right. So sometimes the numbers don't work in your favor, but it's a matter of ingenuity. So how are you going to make this happen? Because you need X, Y, and Z to happen. I think the other piece of it is really to be precise, right? And again, I bring the authentic piece back to it. It's like, this is what I'm doing. This is my language is precise. This is my offer. This is why you should care. And this is how we should proceed in my next step. And make sure all those 3 things are things of value for your target customer, and staying really true and focused there, because it's super easy to hit, use this template, use this template, use this template.
That's dead.
And it's dead. It's dead. I mean, it's not dead, because I get those emails day in and day out. I'm sure we all do. But it doesn't really work anymore.
It's dying, I should say.
People still do it. And I just get emails with the wrong names. I get emails with the wrong companies, the wrong positions. I mean, all this automation.
With the parentheses and then says first name.
It's like, who's going to be successful that way? But they are. It's a numbers game, right? Like, to your point. And so it works, but it's not going to work great.
I love both answers. Coming up through a sales adjacent career, I also did something similar, wrote down my key metrics, and I also always wrote a little note saying perfect play, which meant like make no mental errors, because in recruiting, similar to sales, you are really, in my position, I was selling ideas, so it was even more difficult once people became nervous if I said something or messed the process up. I wanted to follow up with a question for both of you as well about what makes the best and the worst sales professionals that you've either managed, coached, or seen throughout your career. I wanted to start with Brian.
So we'll talk about sales leaders. The worst, in my opinion, are the ones that don't coach. They don't get in and block and tackle. And then two, they're not prepared to actually sell themselves. And I'm not saying that a sales leader should have a number, because that's a totally different conversation, but they should be able to help they should be good enough at sales themselves to help close deals, and they should maybe only work on the bigger deals and help coach some, because you can only upskill somebody if they can start to see you do it and then move out of the way. So I think the willingness to roll your sleeves up and the willingness to coach.
Yeah, amen to that. I think the authoritarian sales boss model, where they crack the whip at people who don't perform, don't hit their numbers, is probably on its way out. I'm not sure there's many organizations that really can function effectively like that, or at least many startups.
They still try.
They still try. It's an environment that's ripe for attrition. People don't stay. I think the ones that I've seen be most successful are the ones that have sales leaders that are most effective, are the ones that get out there and are collaborative, who understand the customer, who understand the challenges their teams are facing and the territories they're facing them in, and can adjust strategy accordingly. What works in Minnesota may not work in Southern California, right? What works for audience A may not work for audience B. And to make allowances, right? And to help that team or that team member be successful and stay on strategy, on point, despite nuances in the market.
I think one more thing, which I think is going to play out in the, if we are, and I personally believe we are in a recession or heading into one, but I'm not an economist, having leadership that understands how to deal in this environment. And fortunately or unfortunately, both fortunately and unfortunately, we haven't seen a recession, a real recession, for 15 years, which means the sales leader would, you can do the math and see if they had any leadership experience during the last recession. That would have been 2008 to 2010. I don't know.
The other thing I'd add is, for a sales leader to be successful, they need a diverse team, and they need to know how to use the diversity to their advantage. It's not just about having a few women and a few, folks from different places and, whatevers, that are super duper important. I'm not discounting it, but it's having people who can play to their strengths, right? Having people who are really good at opening doors, people who are really good at deepening relationships and placing them in the right accounts or the right territories, to help them and the business grow. So it's folks who understand the appropriate makeup of the team that's going to both open doors and grow relationships, not just one or the other. Because you can have a lot of churn really fast with a bunch of folks who are really good at opening doors and getting that first sale, but not really good at growing an account.
So I agree with what you're saying. There's two things. One is, I've seen the best sales teams I've seen, that they make it so that teams are open to and willing to say, hey, I think this account is better for you. Your personality is going to be better for this account. Please take it. I'm going to screw. I will do that because I know my personality. I will screw an account up. I'll hand it off to somebody else. And the second is, if you don't think about the diversity issue early, it's really hard to think about it later. You can maybe answer this better than I can, but women are not going to want to join a sales team if it's 15 men. It's going to be harder to get a diverse team if it's not diverse from early on. So you really should be thinking about that early on.
Agreed. Yeah. I just think the more diversity in thinking and makeup that a team has, the better your ideas and your go-to-market strategies will be. Period. Full stop. There is not one person can sell to every single client out there effectively. Different people click differently with other people, right? And that's just a reality in life. And we'll all benefit if we acknowledge that we need to play to our strengths.
100%.
Few more questions, and I will open it up for more questions from the audience, since we are very curious what people came here for, questions they may have for us. So this is a question for Karen. Should a founder also engage in sales? When should a founder consider hiring somebody else or outsourcing the function when it comes to sales at a company?
Yeah, yes, a founder should always do sales, and the founder should always continue to be involved in sales. I mean, I've been working with organizations where the CEOs are still listening and attending sales calls well into their product development and well beyond. Know thy customer is the Bible. When should you hand off? When you know your customer well enough to know exactly how they're going to react in any situation. When you have a VP of sales, you can say, this is our strategy too, in a very confident way. 75, 85% is probably about the right number, with, because there's always still some mystery and learnings. But I would say for a founder to really take a step back, you got to be clear on what your ideal customer is, who you're selling to, why you're selling to them, and what their motivations are.
I agree with you on everything you said. I would only change it a little bit, and I think you probably agree, is that your ideal customer is going to, if you do well and you're still in business in 20 years, your ideal customer is going to change several times. Yeah. And if you're not helping to figure that out and stay in front of it, I can't say this for a fact because I don't work there and I don't know him, but I believe Larry Ellison from Oracle is still selling. And even if he's not going out and selling to individual accounts, he's still selling big ideas. He's still got a sales hat on in some capacity. I don't think a good CEO can ever stop selling. That's my personal belief. I know there's some very, very technicals. Even Bill Gates, I don't think he was he had Ballmer with him, so he didn't necessarily need to be as much of a sales leader, but you've got to always be out selling.
100% agree. Always be closing. There's always a deal. There's always a new customer.
That's an old school one.
It's true though. I mean, the best sales books I've ever read are from like the 1950s. You look at the Ogilvies or the Carnegies of the world, their advice still rings true. I refer to How to Win Friends and Influence People day in and day out. And there's a meme floating around from Ogilvy of Ogilvy and Mather about knowing that customer and how to sell to them.
Genius.
It's genius. It's classic. And people and people's motivations don't change, right? Sales hasn't changed. It's our tools that have changed. And they've changed significantly, but the underlying principles of persuasion have been around since Aristotle.
All of these answers, I found out this the hard way, starting a passion project as a founder. I had to sell my idea very early on, and it wasn't something that I was really prepared for, so love both answers. One last question for both of you. Is there a magic formula for a cold call? I know that there's a myth, like, yes, like I'm fantastic at cold calls. Some people avoid them like the plague, but is there actually a magic formula? We can start with Karen.
I don't think so. I think there's a lot of formulas out there. Dear so-and-so, I'm reaching out because here's why you should care. Call me, love so-and-so. They work sometimes. I think it's the wrapper that makes all the difference. The reason you're reaching out has to be genuine and authentic. Again, I'm sure everybody here gets 100 cold emails, right? A week, a day, a minute. For some, which ones do you look at? Why do you look at them? It's because you think they're personal and relevant because there's something of interest. A cold call is, I mean, cold call, cold email. Nobody calls much anymore. It could be a fantastic way to reach somebody if they pick up the phone. I think it's all about creativity. I was listening to Allison Levine. She's a speaker out of Duke who was talking about how she landed a job at one of the big investment banks with a liberal arts background. She had missed the big meetup. And what she did is she took postcards and like mailed them to all the recruiters apologizing for going on a hiking trip that was on her bucket list. And she mailed them from the top of whatever the South American mountain was. She was hiking at the time. And so they all got them, and she landed interviews at like 50% of them and eventually landed a job because she was creative and thoughtful about how she did it. That's no different than a cold call, right? Well, you got to know your audience. You got to know what's going to stick and resonate with them in order to get a response. So is there a formula? I mean, I think the formula is what's going to make them pick up the phone.
as a longtime buyer, if someone left me a voicemail or an email, yeah, most of them get deleted. But if there's a hint in either of those that they've actually researched me, then I'll pay attention. I get a call that says, we're driving by the plant and we're in the area. It's like, okay, I'm going to at least listen to this one. I mean, they know where the plant is. So any little tidbit of information saying you actually know who you're talking to is going to help get that envelope opened at least.
Yeah.
So I agree with everything you said, and my guess is you're a buyer of a large ticket. People you're buying large ticket items. Okay.
Mostly supply chain.
Okay. So, but
systems, warehouses, trucks, all sorts of things.
Right. So if so that's why the what you're selling, it matters in the ticket size. If I'm selling $1 million logistics solution or a $100,000 truck, yeah, I better customize it, and there should be margin in it that I can spend the time to do that. If I'm selling something that's transactional, then I better have my messaging down so that I can send those annoying emails and those annoying calls. And my company does both. We do thousands of calls and emails every day. Yes, that's where the annoying ones, with customization. And what you're looking for is I'm not looking for everybody to respond, but if I send out 1,000 and I get 3 responses to a message, I all of a sudden learned what message, and I tested 10 different messages in those 1,000 emails, and I learned which of those 10 messages worked. The next 1,000, I might get 10 responses. And so then I start to iterate and I start to figure out, wow, this message is what my audience cares about. Then when I pick up the phone and call you, I'm more likely to leave you a message about something that you care about. So I'm in agreement with both of you, but I'm also, there's some methodologies to it that do work.
I mean, I come off, I know, as anti-cold call, anti-cold email, but I actually love the market research element of cold outreach.
I love it.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's something that most founders don't really understand, that if you send out 100 cold emails and you get 10 responses, that's valuable information that you got to dig deeper on.
You get 10 responses from 100 emails, you got something good.
You get
yeah. Call me. I'm interested in your company if you do.
Yeah. To me, that's how you should be using cold outreach, is to do experiments at scale. No different than an A/B test on a website. But how are you going to get somebody on a website? Well, you do an A/B ad, right? You hope they see them. Cold email is probably a lot cheaper and a lot faster in some ways.
The other thing about cold is, I should share it. There's a diagram we use. There's a stage in which when you do something cold, you're rubbing up against. If I'm on the phone with you or I'm sending you something cold and you respond, that's giving me real information and feedback. And to me, there's nothing as good. And unfortunately, we don't have with the phone systems, you can't get through as often. But there's nothing like a cold call, because I can get that raw feedback to know how someone's responding to my message and understand if it's landing, and I can adjust it in real time. The other great place to test a cold message is a conference or a trade show. I love going with companies I work with and standing at their booth and with a clipboard and testing messages all day long. Just to do one message 10 times, one message 10 times, and see which one works.
Yeah.
I love that. And as somebody that has made a lot of cold calls as a recruiter, I think it's also okay to ask why. So if somebody, for example, tells me, I'm not looking for a job, and I pose the question, why? I think that's a powerful one. Always ask why.
I was testing something a couple weeks ago for one of our clients, and I got a no, and my heart sunk, my belly fell. I was like, oh God. And I, of course, asked why, followed up, thanks so much. Like, really want to understand a little bit more. What was it about the offer? Can you tell me more? It just doesn't fall under my purview, was the answer. I was the wrong person. So all that kind of gut stuff that I think probably all the founders feel when they get rejected, or salespeople feel when they get rejected, can be alleviated just by like, oh, wait, maybe the targeting's off, or maybe something's going on here. And it was no big deal. He was happy to tell me why. You know, you don't know if you don't ask. And no, a lot of times going back to the market research is just as important, and I'd argue in most cases, more important to understand than the yeses.
Knowing who, like, so a sales team that figures out who not to call and not to spend their time on is more efficient.
Yeah.
So knows good. As long as you document it and recognize that this is not a buyer. I was working with a company, they were an accounts receivable software company years ago, and we found that, you know, middle-aged men who worked for manufacturing companies were not going to buy. It was millennial CFOs that were interested. They were more open to automating a process. So we stopped calling a certain, you know, stereotype and persona, and we started having a lot more success.
Yeah, yeah. The first question I always start with is, who do you want to reach and why? And how do they buy, right? Like, if you can't answer those three questions, then you should be cold emailing, cold calling, and doing a lot more research on the companies and the targets. Because most of the times our clients are way out here with their strategies and their target list. And really the goal is to bring it here so that you have a repeatable process that can be worked to drive sales. You want those numbers up without a ton of effort. There's no reason to be calling, as many of these companies do, everybody in an organization to see who the buyer is, right? Figure out who the buyer is, how they think, what the levers are, and then double down on that. Even if it eliminates clients or potential clients in the margins, it actually brings you more returns to go narrow and deeper
100%.
at the beginning than to go broad and wide.
And if you're having a hard, you should try cold calling, you should try emailing, you should try LinkedIn. And if that's not working, you're not getting enough calls, enough people to talk to, try something like user interviews and actually pay people to take the call with you. You're not going to, you might end up selling something, but on the premise that you're not going to sell them something, and just get their feedback of like, how is this decision made at your organization? Who's the person who makes the decision? You know, here's our value proposition. Does that resonate with you? Why? You know, use that to find out all the things that Karen just said, and you will learn a lot so that when you start to do your other activities, they'll be more successful.
Thank you so much, both of you. And now we'll open it for questions from the audience. Very curious to get to know you and yeah, get some questions answered.
Hi. So I'm not in sales, I'm in marketing. And my question, I have so many questions that I just want to like grill you guys, but like to keep it simple, what's the best way I can support you? If let's say I'm stepping into a new organization, there's an existing sales team. I tend to do CMO positions. So it's like building the marketing side. What's the best way to become your best friend?
Do you want to answer that?
Give me materials I can use. I mean, honestly, more than anything, help me understand the targets, what you're doing, so I can sync my efforts up with you, so that your efforts fuel my outreach, right? The second piece is help me understand how you're thinking about the funnel, right? What are you doing for lead generation? What are you doing for prospecting? What's the journey those folks take? Let's say it's you're getting online signups, right? What's the journey those folks are taking? What do they know? What do they not know? And what insights do you have as a marketer that I need to know to leverage in my sales call to push the ball forward?
If I can expand on just a little bit as well, just like underneath, if I can build any tool you need, like technical marketer, coding backgrounds, if I can build any tool, what would be the one tool that you say, oh, this guy's great?
Can I answer that before I answer that?
Yeah.
Let me. I want to
Some time
take
to
that.
think on that
No,
one.
yeah. If I was coming in, if I was you and I was coming to an organization, the first thing I would do is ask if you can go on sales calls.
Mhm.
I would ask if I could, if they're making cold calls, I'd ask if I one day a week could sit next to the BDRs and make cold calls with them and hear the objections they're getting, and find out all the objections, why people are not taking their calls, why people are not buying from them, what's the obstacle in a way, hearing that, and then come up with the materials so that you can arm them with what will help overcome, because if you can help them overcome objections, you will be successful. That's, if they can overcome those, if those objections are real, and that's what's in their way of getting meetings and then getting the deals, and go throughout, as she said, go through the funnel and figure out along the way, because there's going to be at the demo stage, at each stage of the process of all the way from cold to close, there's going to be drop-off rates. Find out why people are dropping off at each step and come up with solutions to that. You will be enormously successful. Tools, great. The tools should support that.
Can I ask one quick question?
Please.
Something that I noticed over like 10 years of doing marketing and whatnot is stepping into different organizations is that, like, what's the best way to talk to you to, like, pick your brain on what is the best SQL to set up? Like, if I'm creating the MQLs and I'm doing it based off of your SQLs, what's the best way to direct that conversation with the salespeople into, like, what is the best SQL and how often should we revisit it, especially as a startup?
Best SQL is one that closes.
Like, I want money. And it's like,
yeah, exactly, right?
I mean, I go back to what he said, like talk to them, figure out where the problems are. Like, is there a problem with the SQL? Do you need to revisit? I would say a quarterly meeting is probably the best cadence for that. I'm hesitant to build any new out-of-the-box systems without understanding what the current state is, because you'll be solving the wrong problem if you just jump right into build. If you understand your sales team's mindset, their objectives, their goals, and their pain points, you're going to be much better prepared to answer your own questions than just coming in and changing everything.
Yeah. I've had really good relationships with sales, and I've had not so great relationships with sales. I prefer that, like, I'm still best friends with a couple of the sales managers I knew, so.
Yeah.
The best friend is gonna hopefully is because you guys worked well, and that relationship can be fractured when there's an unrealistic expectation on either side. And so figuring that out early is and sales will blame marketing, but just make sure that it's clear what the objectives are and what you're delivering. And hopefully it's not just a number, it's a quality, it's a certain qualitative deliverable.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll do another question from the audience here, then we have a digital question, and we'll come back to the in-person audience after.
Awesome. Thank you. Well, great panel. Thank you so much. So a question, we are a technology company. We now at this stage that we have everything ready, kind of, at least we think we are ready to go to the market. If we need to hire one person, what would that person be? Would it be a marketing role, or would it be the salesperson to just become from? Because we are getting all sorts of different ideas. I just want to hear your thoughts too, because now we are hearing from sales consultant, marketing consultant that 70%, 80% is done before they get to the salespeople. So you just need to educate that. And we don't have, like, those type of disruptive products or something. It's just a services company.
You say everything is ready. Sorry, what do you mean by that? I mean, if everything is ready, then you don't need anybody.
In terms of the services that we think at least we have that we could offer and put in front of customers. If that...
Before I'd hire anybody, I would go out and talk to customers myself and find out that what you just said is I think what you just said is a hypothesis that needs to be proven. And once you prove that, then you can go start to hire people to support you. Now, you might have some consultants that help you figure out how to take those hypotheses and test them and do that. And that's, I don't care whether it's a marketing consultant or sales consultant, whatever, it doesn't matter. But you should break that down into steps and build a process to get there before you start thinking about hiring too many people.
I would agree. I also am still not clear what you're selling. Is it technology? Is it a subscription? What kind of business is it?
It's a consulting company, technology consulting company for SMBs. So we cover on the MSP side, we cover AI, and we cover the cloud services. So it's kind of modern. It's not a startup per se, but we cover a wide range of services, but it's specifically targeted at small to mid-size, less than.
Do you have any customers?
10.
Okay, so who brought those customers in?
Well, me and my co-founder.
What's it take to get to 11?
Well, okay.
Could you? I know, I'm just wondering, like, can you get to 11 without another person?
Yes.
Okay, so tell me, call me when you get to so many customers that you can't get any more without hiring somebody, and then we'll talk about who you need to hire.
Look, yes, all of what Brian said. Marketing, I think, is a glamorous position in a lot of ways, but there's a lot of people out there who've got great marketing skills and are available for hire for one-off things. If you've got a personal sale that you need to make, you need somebody who understands the business and can connect with those folks. Marketing materials can support them in a very, very meaningful way, right? So if you're saying you need more of you, right, and you're selling, then I think you've got your answer.
So the next question from our digital audience is actually selling beyond capacity. So what do you do when you hire someone who's doing so well at sales that they sell too much and you can't actually support operationally?
You clone them.
Can you send me, can you email me? I'm interested in investing.
What do you do? I mean, you're happy you have them. You understand what's working. Then you look at what it is they're doing that's working, that to see if it's the technology that the product they're selling. Is it them themselves because they bring some sort of special sauce to the table that you can identify? Or is it really just a fantastic product market fit, right? You understand what's working and double down on that.
And everything you've said, I just want to know, have you started to figure out, do the customers look alike, or are you more of a service business that this customer looks like this and this looks like this and this customer looks like this, and therefore I can't juggle all those balls, and so the more they sell, the more balls I have to juggle, and it's not linear. It's if you have 3 customers that are different, the 4th customer is not another ball to juggle, it's 5 more balls to juggle. And so then you have a product problem, and you need to either you recognize that you're a service business and you've got limited scalability, or you need to figure out how to get more honed in on a specific customer with specific needs that I can sell more of. So there might, I don't know enough about your business to answer it, but those are some of the ways I would think about, those are the questions I'd be asking you, let's put it that way.
It's a really important point, Brian. I've seen a lot of early stage entrepreneurs generate a lot of money from a lot of things. And when you ask them, what do you do? It's all over the place. It's like, the 10-line introduction. I do this and I do this and I do this. And the question I've always kind of come back to is like, show me your business plan. Like, where is your money actually coming from? Is it coming from like product A, like 80% coming from product A and 20% coming from 10 other products? If that's the case, then, focus on product A.
And is it scalable? Like, can you keep doing this, or are you gonna like can you hire people to build can you, if you're at 1 million, can you actually get to 10 million, or is it like literally impossible? Because it's impossible to hire the people that you need to do to get to the 2nd million. Then don't hire another salesperson.
Okay, we'll go back to the in-person audience. Does anyone else have a question?
He does.
Go ahead.
Go for it.
Okay, so fun question. With all the AI tools out there, which ones have you been messing around with them? Like, is there anything that you would like to have exist? Like, is there anything that you've tried and it's like, oh, this is great? Like, we were creating, for the sales team, we were creating videos of them talking so they can reach more clients. And it looks like them, the voice is captured from them, and they just put in a text prompt and then it just creates videos to reach more people. What is your experience with AI tools the past year?
So video's working well. I have a company that's a client. I can send you the name of the company if you're interested in creating videos at scale. Videos do work well in a sales process for sure. There's a company called Lavender. Full disclosure, I'm an investor in the company, but it scores your emails. And it's really interesting. What it does, it renders it so you can see it on your mobile phone. You can see what it looks like on a mobile phone because 90% of emails are written on mobile phones, and then it grades your email of whether it's gonna get through and people are gonna read it. So there's a lot of obviously I'm not gonna be the first to say ChatGPT, obviously. So there's tools coming out daily. I think if we spend too much time looking at them, that could be a full-time job. So I'm not spending a ton of time on it.
I mean, the one AI tool I really want is the one that can download my brain and actually get all of my ideas out of it without me having to write it down or tell an app about it. I tend to agree with Brian, right? Like that there's a lot of tools out there. I think we end up finding the tools that work for us, that fit our needs. Jasper.ai, not an investor in it, has worked brilliantly for me. I've seen other clients use it as well. ChatGPT clearly has great things. Being with creative mode, it depends on what you need from a sales perspective. I think I'm really interested to see what some of HubSpot's new tools are going to do. The ones that just got released. Again, I come back to like, what's the problem we're trying to solve with these AI tools? And how do we need to leverage it? Where are the gaps? And right now, I think the biggest gap is like, how do we connect with customers in a much more scalable and meaningful way? If you think about it as market research, there's some new market research tools out there that are AI based. I haven't had the luxury of playing with them yet, but I can't wait because I think that's just going to accelerate the product market fit question to answer. Go ahead.
Something that's in a last company that happened was we were building pieces for the salespeople to sell themselves as more thought leaders on LinkedIn and other things. What kind of content would you guys like? Let's say us entirely here, we're working with you guys and we're building the content you need. What kind of content pieces would you prefer to come across as more as of a thought leader on LinkedIn or other places?
I'm happy to. I think there's salespeople who want to be thought leaders need to do some of that themselves. I think you can prompt them and you can give them pieces to share, but if it's the same piece that everybody's sharing, then it's going to be obvious, and that's not thought leadership. Thought leadership is original, and so I would maybe coach and there's some great programs out there to learn how to become a thought leader. I would maybe coach my salespeople of how to do that, and less of formulaic giving them, oh, put this out there, because if you give everybody the same thing to put out there, then all of your people are the same thought leader as each other, and that's not really thought leadership.
What if it's like changing the point of view of things like, hey, about this thing, these are the things I agree upon, not this stuff. This is another person in the field that's really good. What is your thoughts? Blah, blah, blah.
I mean, it's too generic for me. I mean, unfortunately, I can't say yes or no to that because it sounds interesting. I could say yes and it could blow up on somebody, right? But because there's some people that you wouldn't want to say what they think about that, But I think there's a huge opportunity for thought leadership for sure for sales, and I think you're going to find more of that. And I think some companies are scared of their salespeople doing that, and I think they need to get out of their way. I think they need to let their salespeople and they need to encourage them and be the place to work that allows that and fosters that. So I think having an environment that fosters that is a good idea.
Thank you. Oh,
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say I agree, and I think good writing is undertaught, underestimated, undervalued, and I think that if you're a good writer, you're going to learn how to structure your thoughts, break down a problem, and actually move customers from point A to point B in an effective way.
That's the number one skill going forward, 100%. Probably always has been.
Yeah. So no more AI for writing. It can help you edit.
I think that's a wonderful point. Thank you so much to our panelists and moderators for their robust session today.